My name's pronounced
TruthSeekah
Auman.
and/or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and/or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles! Psychics! Everything's ungodly! Dark Savage!
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian!
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark sided stuff!
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is the TruthSeekah podcast. I'm your host, TruthSeekah. Excited and delighted to be with you guys again today. Got an exciting episode for you guys lined up. We're going to talk about all things spirituality, all that good stuff. So, yeah, it's coming up real soon. I want to say a quick thank you to everybody who has been supporting my work. No matter how long you've been doing it, man, I'm elated. Thank you guys again. From the bottom of my heart, as always, this show does not exist without your financial support. We are listener supported. So thank you to everybody who has been supporting via Patreon. You guys mean the world to me. Thank you for believing in my work. If you'd like to support, please head to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to exclusive interviews, music. My entire discography of music is available there as well. And, yeah, a bunch of cool stuff. Thursday night, School of the Mystics. We do every Thursday night. So it's a spiritual community that we're building here. And we try one-on-one participation and trying to listen to the voice of the intuition and the Holy Spirit speaking to you, where you can kind of build in confidence in a place to be able to hear that voice speaking to you and speak it out. Empathy, intuition, all that good stuff. Really exciting stuff. So if you're looking for like-minded people to build with, Thursday night School of the Mystics is the place. So we're doing it tonight. You'll get an email confirmation once you sign up under Patreon for any level of giving. So that's available too. So my entire discography, 200 plus songs available for you, and all the new stuff I'm working on too. The Chakras EP, there's a bunch of that stuff on there already. And the ESP EP, which will soon follow. You get access to that stuff months before anybody else gets availability to it in the general public. So shout out to some of the latest supporters we have here. Shout out to Angela Green. Shout out to Brother Home Sauce. I see you there, man. And Benjamin Ween and his family. Thank you, brother, for the support and believing in the work. Also, shout out to Adam Brink for you guys giving at the diamond body level. Y'all are awesome. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on today's guest, Catherine Auman. Catherine, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me on the show.
Definitely. Really, really good to have you. You cover a lot of stuff on your website. You've been doing this for a while, and there's a bunch of stuff that we talk about on here that I'm sure we can get into. But first, let's just kind of give people a background about what you bring to the table and some of your credentials and who you are, if you want to do that.
Sure, I'd love to. I am a spiritual psychotherapist in practice here in Los Angeles, and I've been doing that for more than 30 years. What that means to me, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I am a licensed psychotherapist But I started my work studying transpersonal psychology, which is the study of not only mainstream psychology, but higher levels of consciousness. And so we study not only Western psychology, but Eastern religions, Native American traditions, shamanism. We include that as all just as valid as Western psychology. So with that viewpoint, I work a lot with people in the yoga communities, meditators, intuitives, empaths, and I have the Transpersonal Counseling Center here. And lately, we've been also working with psychedelic integration for people who are having psychedelic experiences, maybe want a little help integrating that back into their lives. So these are my passions, as it sounds like they are for your listeners. And so I'm really happy to meet you guys.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of is a good segue for something I found out today. For some reason, and I know people have hit me up in my inbox and told me in the past, but I just found out today that, or last night rather, that Amanita muscaria is illegal in the U.S. I thought it was illegal. The magic
Actually, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if it was legal.
It's legal. Everything that I'm finding online.
The wire there.
Everything that I'm finding online is showing that Amanita muscaria is legal. Now, the golden teachers and all these other strains of mushrooms, which we've used in the past, are illegal. But for some reason, everything I'm finding on that, I had some friends tell me this in the past, and I just didn't believe them. But I've been doing the research, and I can't find anything online saying that it's illegal. Really interesting. So, when it comes to psychedelics, have you had personal experiences with these?
Yes, I have. I experimented quite a bit in my 30s. I did it probably about 30 times. And then recently have been getting in more into MDMA and doing some microdosing. So these experiences have I have a couple of videos on my website and on my YouTube channel about how I really feel that under the right circumstances, these can really enhance consciousness and help people grow and understand higher states of consciousness. And of course, they are illegal. We have to make that disclaimer, but that they're often, if they're used with the right setting, you guys have probably talked about that before. And so now there's a lot of guided work being done for particular psychological issues. That's very exciting. So yeah. I see it as valid. I support MAPS, which is working on legal research, showing the potential benefits of these substances. And I certainly don't want to advocate for people doing them irresponsibly, but I think that they can teach you a lot about joy and expanded consciousness.
Definitely. I've had some pretty profound encounters. I can count them on one hand when it comes to having a hero dose of going in, but it was definitely a life-changing experience, and kind of doing that life review, getting over the trauma, trying to find the next thing that you're supposed to do in life and almost how to do it, and kind of mapping that out and what that looks like. Some really profound experiences that have actually changed my life on like the deeper hero dose level. But when it comes to the microdosing, what is your experience with that? How does that make you feel if you were just to take a microdose? And how much is that? Would you suggest, is it either, I know a lot of people say either a gram or less? What is the whole thing with that?
I actually don't know the measurements. I looked it up in Jim Fadiman's book, which is the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, which I'd recommend to anybody who's curious. So I don't know the actual amounts because I have a little spray bottle that was given to me, and you just take one spray.
Oh, wow.
And, so it's a very small dose. You may just notice a little speediness, a little more focus, a little more, just a tinier sense of the awe and mystery and wonder of the everyday world.
Would you say that you feel more connected to things, to your emotions, to life in general? Does it make you feel that way?
That sounds like an accurate description. It helps you to tune in, and then for me, the purpose of that is to more and more train my nervous system to feel that connection all the time. So we can do that through meditation. We can do that through a microdose. We can do that through attention, where we put our attention. Just if we put our attention on those connected states that we felt and try to bring that into the everyday life, that I believe is the purpose. That's the goal.
I've said it in the past mistakenly, and I know a lot of people say it as well, because there's people who are scared of it because it's illegal, because they don't want to give their mind over to another substance or whatever the case is. There's different fears, and I think there's healthy fears in general, right? You don't want to just run into something head first. But I've said the phrase that you can reach those same psychedelic states through meditation or through Kundalini yoga. And I've caught myself, because they're not the same, right? The psychedelic realms are different states of consciousness that you access, maybe privy just with that substance. Maybe you're talking about some of the Eastern philosophies and things like that, Native American, shamanism, Indian, that there's different spirits that are attached to these plants that you actually commune with and build with over time. Tobacco is one as well, different plant medicines and things like that. Would you say that's accurate, that it's a different experience than just, I can reach those heightened states by simply, fasting and, meditation or whatever? Is it different to you?
It's a great question. I haven't meditated to really high states. I've just done more like daily meditation. Mm-hmm. My sense of it is that they're all very different roads leading to the same end. Mm-hmm. So if we set out today and started driving towards New York City, some of us might go through the Grand Canyon, and some of us might go through Kansas, and some of us might take a detour and go through Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I think that all of those roads are going to give us different experiences, but we're all going to end up in New York City. Mm-hmm. So I think that the higher state of consciousness is the goal. There's many different paths to get there.
But
I don't think psychedelics are for everyone.
Yeah.
If someone's really afraid, I think they should honor that fear. I know in my own life, I sensed when I was younger that I wasn't really psychologically stable enough to use psychedelic drugs, and I was right, and I waited until I felt like I was stable enough, and I think it's very good that I did that. And I think people with psychological issues, maybe their lives aren't going too well, might not be the best time to experiment with those kinds of substances. I think if we're afraid, then we should honor that fear and pay attention to what the message of the fear is. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily just discount it.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're there for a reason, and you have to kind of get over your own hurdles and stuff too. I think it's not always a negative thing where fear comes in. Like, I believe in healthy fears as well. Whenever you're talking about studying different philosophies from around the world, especially in the East and things like that, maybe looking into, like I said, shamanism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and things like that. And there's different principles and things like that stick out to you, right? And I think a lot of us right now are kind of in this stage of I guess what we would call syncretism, where we study these religions, study these spiritual practices and things, and see what links us together, what makes us the same versus what makes us separate or different, and to see the things that we like in each one, and kind of building our own philosophies out of, I'll take this from here, that from here, and this, and kind of make my own thing with it. Sometimes those people in those religions may get offended that you're using their terminology or you're using their prayer beads or anything like that. Was that something that you've kind of did with all of your studying, to say, okay, I like this, but I don't like the dogma, I'm going to keep that or whatever? I mean, it's kind of what I've did with my spirituality over the years of studying. Just keep the good stuff, let the bad stuff go. Is that kind of what happens when you're studying all of the philosophies? Is that healthy, or does that lead to confusion? Where are we at with that?
I would agree with you on that. I think there's a great phrase in 12-step programs, which is take what you need and leave the rest. And I think that I think that we're really lucky to live in a day and age when we can choose, when we can sample a lot of things, when we can feel what's right for us. And I think as we experience higher states of consciousness, we really start moving into whatever promotes love, whatever promotes connection. This is what's true.
Yeah.
If it's my way over everyone else and everyone else is wrong, that's not, to me, leading in the right direction.
Yeah.
But if it's like I accept more and more people, I feel loving towards more and more people, I feel the connection with myself, with all the other beings on the planet, animals, nature, existence. This to me is a sign that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's kind of with each one of those philosophies. There's different sects within the religions and things like that. Some of them are more open. Some of them are more closed off. And then for any of them to feel like theirs is the only way, it kind of gets into just some muddy ground or whatever. To think that this is the only way. This is the only way to God, the only path to God. So I come from a Judeo-Christian background, and I definitely come from that. I mean, that's kind of like here in the West. I mean, the majority of people are Christians. So when we're talking about some of this stuff out of the East or these different philosophies or whatever, people feel like they have it figured out. But the same dogmas and stuff that I've experienced in Christianity, you'll find people, obviously, I guess the Abrahamic religions, but some of the other more, which you would think would be an open philosophy. Some of those people feel like they have it all figured out and everybody else is wrong as well, right?
Exactly. I live here in Los Angeles, was kind of the capital of the yoga, New Age scene. And there's what I would call fundamentalist New Agers. Of like, my coconut milk is purer than your coconut milk and you're wrong. And so I think fundamentalism can come in any garb. We're used to talking about fundamentalist Christians, but we have, I think, fundamentalism. I'm not sure the meaning of the word, but to me, that means my way is right and everyone else is wrong. That's just coming from ego.
Yeah.
That's just, I'm better than you. I'm better than everyone else. That's an ego position that can get quite dangerous.
Yeah, wanted to talk to you as well because you got a lot of work out there about Tantra. I've studied it somewhat, haven't really practiced it. I know a lot about sexual energy. I know a lot about the anatomy and connection and things like that. So I wanted to talk to you about that. I have to be 100% honest. I'm kind of a little scared of the subject a little bit when it comes to just some of the stuff I've seen online. Maybe just with any religion or any type of spiritual practice, you're going to find people who take it so far. I've seen some weird stuff online looking up Tantra practices and really weird stuff where people are rubbing on each other in these big groups of like orgies and stuff. And I ain't going to lie, it's like, it kind of scares me a little bit. So I was kind of iffy, like, do I really want to have this conversation? But I'm curious, right? Because I understand sexual energy. I understand the power of coming together. I understand the power of intercourse, right? So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Tantra to try to get you to explain your position on it and what it means to you.
Some of that stuff scares me as well, I just have to say. So
good. Yeah. Some of the stuff I've seen, I was like, oh, we're talking about this? Oh, Lord.
Tantra fundamentalists. I actually come from what's called Neo-Tantra. I come out of the tradition of Osho, who was Rajneesh, who some of your listeners may have had a unfortunate encounter with on the Netflix show Wild Wild Country.
Yeah.
Which wasn't really about Osho so much as with some criminals who were following him. But anyway, he was that guy in white. But he was a Tantra master, and he taught that Tantra. He said they're basically, if you get down to the root of it, there's two types of spiritualities. There's the type where all is sacred, and there's the type where this is sacred and this isn't.
Yeah.
So most, like the Judeo-Christian that we grew up in, is very much this is sacred and this isn't. So basically you grow up being told, basically I was taught that if it feels good, it's bad.
Yeah.
If it's fun, it's bad.
Yeah.
So, I think most of us have rejected that. And so, but you see this even subtly here in the New Age movement. You see, this coconut water is good and this coconut water is bad. And you're going to go to heaven if you fast in it, not if you eat, and not if you enjoy your life. And sex is basically bad. And all this sort of right and wrong sort of philosophy.
Yeah.
And Osho taught that at its core, the Tantra philosophy is that all is sacred. And this is actually hard for the mind to grasp on, because the mind is always trying to divide and say this and
Compartmentalize.
that,
Yeah.
compartmentalize, analyze. In the heart, however, and in these expanded states of consciousness, we get into a place where we actually experience, not think about, we actually experience, oh, all is sacred. Ah, this raindrop. Ah, this human being sitting next to me. This flower. This, we start to get a higher perspective that even some things that seem wrong with the world, maybe that's all just part of the unfolding of the planet. And so from this position of all is sacred, sex is also sacred. And sex is sacred is a very unusual concept for anybody in Judeo-Christian upbringing, any sort of fundamentalist upbringing, in this very scary and frightening. And early tantrikas were actually burned alive and killed for celebrating that sex also is sacred. Sex has obviously made people, that makes people pay attention. It's really only a small part of a tantric philosophy.
Okay. So if is it that all is sacred, or is it the sacred energy, or tapping into that energy would be tantra, and it's just sex is a part of that as well?
If we go to the core and we see that all is sacred and sex is sacred, then we start approaching sex as a way to tap into the sacred and to go to higher levels of consciousness.
Yeah. Now,
some people in the West have gotten a hold of this, and they've started, here's all these techniques for higher orgasms and so on.
Yeah.
That's okay, but that's not actually what we would call really a tantric approach. So I lived in a Tantra ashram in India for a year. And for example, we would meet a man and a woman, or two lovers of either any persuasion. And we would attempt to be in this moment, sharing love, whether that's sexual or not, regardless of the Western mind, which is like, I could only share love or sexual energy with this person based on how they look, or how much money they make, or all this criteria of the mind, that in a tantric perspective actually doesn't make any sense. So it starts from this, let's share love. Let's just sit and see how much love is possible in this moment. So then by expanding into these states of more love and more and a positive approach to sex, then sex becomes something where it's sharing energy instead of trying to reach this goal of orgasm.
Okay. And now is this what we would call an orgy or something?
Well, we didn't.
Was everybody participating, or just these two people, and everybody's there supporting? I mean, how does that work?
Okay, so we would have various different exercises. So we didn't really ever have orgies just to have orgies. There was a sense of, in fact, if there was ever anything that was like an orgy, I was out of there. But here's an example of an exercise that I like.
Nope. Okay.
I'm like, that's not my thing. Okay, but we would do certain exercises. For example, I think this is very beautiful, and I talk about this even when I talk to conservative audiences. We would be blindfolded. We'd have maybe 30 people in the room, half male and half female. And we would be blindfolded, and we would reach out, and we would, in a blindfolded state, let's say I would reach out and touch your arm. And I would just in that moment feel, what's the energy of this human being? Without being able to see. What's the energy of this human being? Does this feel like friend? Does this feel like my brother? Does this feel like, what's the difference? Can I even tell through the touch if this arm is a male or female? Does this feel like nervous? Does this feel? So we learn to start sensing the physicality of another person without that prejudice of sight. And we started learning so much about other human beings and how to pick up people's energy through sensing, through touch. And this later on would enhance the sexual experience, but in that moment, learning to relate to the world through this higher state of consciousness of using all of the senses. In the West, we're told that the eyes are the only thing of value. More and more, it's just like who's sexually attracted to us more and more is being told that it has to look like somebody who's in a music video, you know?
Yeah.
And getting away from that idea to sense, where's my actual attraction with the person? Where could I share the most love, the most sexual energy on a intuitive, loving level?
So did it almost teach you how to type into your ESP, extrasensory perception, to like be able to pick up on who this person is? I mean, the touch is one thing. There's not really a lot that you can feel, except just their body or whatever. But so it's something you would feel within, maybe, with your intuition, that you pick up on people to know what to offer, or
definitely, it's a matter of training that what you call ESP actually becomes your second nature as you start practicing approaching other people in this way, in a tantric way, which is that I'm attempting to already love everyone. How can I feel your essence in this moment instead of what society has told me I'm supposed to be looking for? I've actually written a book on this called Tantric Dating for listeners who might be single, about how to go out and how to date from a tantric perspective rather than a mainstream perspective, which is, do you meet this list of criteria? Like, do you look like this? Do you have this car? Do you make this much money? Do you dress cool enough for me? Which is a very ego-based versus a spiritual base of let's meet first in love.
Now, is there any downfalls to this, or any warnings, any people who maybe know how to manipulate, these type of people who hang out or kind of are drawn to these circles where they know people are open, that they may be able to take advantage of people, or even opening up your energy to strangers? Is there any warning to that, or are you pretty much protected? Can you does that person have a piece of, do they walk away with a piece of you? How does that work? Is there any warnings there?
Boy, I know what you're talking about, because there's a lot of people who hang around all spiritual circles who aren't
Christian
really
circles too. Yeah, I mean,
right, who aren't really spiritually well. So I think this is part of being on the planet Earth, is that we're always, how much do we open up? And especially as we start growing as spiritual people, sometimes we have a false notion that this means we should just open up to everyone.
Yeah.
And we do need to make sure that we're, for example, these tantric exercises were very safe groups. The doors were closed. There was a safety created.
How many people was like the majority of one? I've watched. I haven't finished the the documentary, but I've seen a good bit. How many people were like involved at like the highest numbers?
Well, at the Osho ashram, there were 500,000 people at some points, but I don't know how many were actually at the place in Oregon. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, in our little private groups, we would have between 12 and 50. But it was people who already pre-qualified as being spiritual. It was people who are already going through exercises of love and trust. So I think that if for a listener who's wanting to start to look into Tantra, I'd say look for teachers where there is a lot of love and trust established, not just go and learn how to have a higher orgasm. Nothing wrong with that. That's not particularly a tantric approach where it would be a good idea to get vulnerable and take some risks.
Yeah, I've seen videos out there now where like energy healers and people who do Reiki and things like that, they have this thing out there where they try to make you have an orgasm without touching you, like being able to move the energy and be able to arouse you without even touching you. Was anything like that going on, like moving energy without touching, or is it more about the physicality
I found that's happening to me spontaneously when I was in the very high consciousness environment. I would be sitting in a chair and I would have an orgasm. That does not happen to me in the West, but in that very rarefied environment where everyone was working on higher consciousness. So I do know that that's possible. In the Tantra that I study and I teach, orgasm is not the goal. Higher consciousness is the goal. In fact, what we've really found and what we teach is that having a goal of having an orgasm keeps you out of the present moment because you're looking towards the future. You're using sex to try to get somewhere. You're trying to get to this place of orgasm. This can be very frustrating for women especially, and for men who are trying to help women have orgasms. And sex in a lot of cases now in the West has become, although it may be an enjoyable experience, it's also become very frustrating because everyone's focusing on this goal of orgasm. And whether women are having it, whether they're not, how soon we're having it, how this and that. And this creates a frustration into sex that actually defeats the purpose of using sex for a higher consciousness. My lover and I can make love for 4 hours, never focusing on orgasm. And all during that time, the energy is building. The love that's happening between us is a very higher frequency, expands our ability for consciousness. The lovemaking goes on, and it's not only just the physical lovemaking, it's going into spiritual realms in this way. So this is actually possible for people. It's never actually talked about in the mainstream, which is one reason I wanted to really come on your show, is to say that nobody's talking about the possibility of sex without orgasm at all, or infrequently, or just if it happens, rather than the mainstream sex has really drawn people away by telling them. I'm sorry?
Like it has to end in an orgasm?
It has to end in an orgasm, and that's the point and the goal. And as spiritual people know, the journey is important, not the goal, right? We hear this a lot from spiritual teachers, but it's never occurred to us, unless we've gotten out of the mainstream about sex, that perhaps that's true with sex as well. Perhaps the lovemaking is more important than the goal of orgasm.
I know,
but that's all kind of put down and called foreplay, as if that's lesser. Yeah. That's a lesser thing to get to the orgasm, instead of maybe it's the point.
Studying sex magic and a lot of deep stuff in like masonry and things like that, harnessing the power of the chi. There's a lot of stuff out there where they get aroused to the point where they're about to ejaculate, and then they cut it off, and they're able to harness that energy that they arose the semen to such a level, and it gives them spiritual energy and spiritual powers and things like that. Is that some of that at all, where it's not about the ejaculation but getting there and then having control over it, almost like you're able to tell it no or whatever? Is there
yes,
some of that
and what my boyfriend says is that it's even more tantric than that, which is that he gets to that point, and then instead of cutting it off and saying no, he relaxes at that moment. And through that, getting up to that peak and then relaxing, there's no harsh cutting off, but then there's the ability to go into a higher state of consciousness and follow the sex energy even further and further. And this creates levels of bliss that are not possible with just getting to orgasm and stopping. You use
it as a vehicle.
It's a vehicle for higher consciousness. It's actually a vehicle and a spiritual path, which to me is a lot more enjoyable than sitting alone meditating. I could be with my partner meditating in sex.
Yeah.
Because our consciousness is just like in meditation. We're in the present moment, focusing on the feeling, focusing on the love, focusing on the energy, the breathing. And you actually start having, you can have visions, you can have messages come to you from staying in these higher states of arousal and not letting it all go with the orgasm, which is what mainstream sex is telling you is the point.
And you haven't heard of any health risks by doing that?
I have not.
Okay.
I've tried to research that. I tried to research if there were any negative. Now, sometimes later in the day, you might feel a little congested energy in the genitals, which means that you haven't helped it move through the rest of the body. And then sometimes you can do some massage and move the energy through the body, so that you don't want to keep it congested in the genitals, but you want it to move throughout the whole body.
Yeah, there's a lot of study out there now that's coming out talking about like people who are like addicted to masturbation and they just don't have get up and go about themselves. They don't have that creativity. They're like wasting their life force almost as they're doing that. And there's a bunch of study out there now that's linked to chronic, pornography addiction and having that drive. And I know, like, all of these practices talk about it a little bit. Interesting thing is if you understand this and then you read the Bible, there's some stuff in the Bible that actually kind of talk about this too, about saving your energy and not wasting it. And I know, like, if we look at boxers or MMA fighters, for the most part, the whole month that if they have a fight coming up, the whole month they won't be sexually active at all because they don't want to, release that I guess tension maybe that builds up and that power that they're able to harness.
Yeah, and again, I think that's about the ejaculation. And men are not taught that to be able to raise that energy and then not ejaculate and share it with the beloved is actually a higher level of development. So I work with some guys who are addicted to porn or sex addicts, and I believe that that's a frustrated desire for sharing with a partner. I don't think anyone really, given the choice of masturbating by themselves or making beautiful love with a partner, I think everyone would prefer a beautiful lovemaking time. And so I feel like these poor people who are caught in this addiction, if they were able to, part of my work is helping them open their heart so they can attract a beloved and make love all day instead of making love to yourself all day. Share that, create more love on the planet. Sexual love is meant to be shared. It's meant to be juicy and wonderful and without frustration. And the way the mainstream culture is teaching us about sex is leading to a lot of lonely frustration.
So for people listening, I know you've kind of touched on it a little bit. It doesn't have to be necessarily Tantra practice with a group of people. This is something that can be done in the privacy of your own home with your spouse and studying these techniques and things, right?
Oh, absolutely. The whole group thing is kind of sensational and isn't really that much a part of it. You can start by just, even if you're pleasuring yourself, you can just start with focusing in on not having the goal to be orgasm, but to be present in the moment without a goal of focusing on pleasure. This is very different than what the mainstream teaches. You just focus on pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And if you get close to orgasm, practice relaxing. And then when you're with your partner making love, you can focus on changing the idea that anything that's not orgasmic is foreplay. It's not foreplay, it's the play. And focus on being in the moment meditatively with making love and let go of the goal of orgasm. You can orgasm at the end if you want, but start training yourself to be a better lover by focusing on what's happening at this moment instead of trying to get somewhere. This is pure Tantra, and it's actually meditation through sex. And meditation, as we were talking about earlier in the program, is one of the routes to higher consciousness. So we can use sex to get to higher consciousness by meditating while we have sex, bringing a meditative approach to sex, instead of using it as a race car trying to get to the end of the track.
So which religious text really covers this the most? Would this be some of the Vedic texts and things like that? Or have you found this in other cultures as well?
Osho talks a lot about the particular texts themselves. I can't really pronounce them and I don't know them well enough. There's something like, there's some Sanskrit texts.
The Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and things like that.
Something like that. And there's particular texts from Tibetan Buddhism. The Saraha was actually the original teacher of Tantra, and he talks about this: meditate while with a partner while in sex.
So a lot of this stuff actually came from Osho. So a lot of the text on it that we have now and the information came from him.
That's a really good place to start because he explains it in language that we can understand. And it's really this idea of become more meditative in sex instead of trying to reach some goal. And the West, as we know, as your listeners know, is all about reaching the goal of more money, more stuff, more this and that. And as anyone who's a truth seeker, anyone who's a spiritual person is going, I think there's more to life than that. And all the spiritual teachers say the truth is here in the present moment. And that means not focusing on the end goal, but on how we get there. So if we bring this approach to sex, we're not focusing on some end goal of orgasm. We're focusing on what's in this present moment. What's the pleasure that I'm having now? And when you can really get in the present moment with pleasure, it starts expanding.
So do you think, as someone who is on that truth seeker journey, that path of awakening, and they're exploring almost every other area of their life about how to be in the present, in the now, your dreams, your goals, your family, your thoughts, everything kind of being in the now moment, eventually you have to kind of cover the topic of sex as well, right?
Well, I want to in my life. Some spiritual seekers are in a tradition where they believe sex is not going to get you there.
Yeah.
You know, many people believe that to become a truly spiritual person, and you know, I can still find this in myself because I was raised with that. And then when I studied Eastern traditions, it's like, well, the truly spiritual person is a guy sitting in a cave somewhere.
Yep.
And I think we've all been indoctrinated with this idea that a true spiritual person is a monk or a nun or some Hindu sitting in a diaper in a cave, you know? And so we have this idea that that's what being spiritual means. And the Tantras say, that's fine. They can live their lives that way. I don't want to. I want to experience higher consciousness through sex, through everything I do. Everything is sacred. So it's very revolutionary compared to the attitudes towards sex and spirituality that we grew up with.
Yeah, we've been teaching that God is in everything. Like if you can't see God in all, then you can't see God at all. And so to say that God is this, God is that, he's not this, he's not that, or it's not this, it you know, God is all. Even the scriptures talk about, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. Everything is God, and he's in it and through it all. So to say that, you know, that's what we like to do. We gotta untrain ourselves, and especially when it comes to enjoying the things of this world, or you know, having monetary pleasures or gain, or enjoying, you know what I'm saying, good food and things like that. We have to unlearn. I've come from the Christian persuasion as well, where it was pretty much a Gnostic understanding that you have to be the suffering servant. If the one who is spiritual among you is the one that does without, who doesn't have any possessions, or just kind of, you know, lives in the woods or lives on someone's couch. And I know people who have taken vows of poverty, and they live in the woods. They literally do, and it was because of a religious vow, because they thought that that's what the text communicated to them, and they don't have any possessions or belongings, and have kind of signed that stuff away. So to move from that thinking, it's in all the other traditions as well as Christianity, that you know, that you can't enjoy life. You know,
exactly.
It's a sin
and
to enjoy life.
Yeah, and I think it's an ongoing process as a spiritual seeker to keep rooting that out of ourselves, because it keeps cropping up. You think you've made some progress on it, and you have, but then you notice, oh, I'm secretly thinking that, you know, to have pleasure is not spiritual. And it's continuing to unwind the fact that God manifests in all of this as well. All of this is sacred. All of this pleasure is sacred. And that conditioning goes deep, that we're not supposed to enjoy things. We're not supposed to enjoy sex. We're not supposed to enjoy things that we can buy, that this is somehow anti-spiritual. We're not, you know, like I keep talking about here, and there's a lot of stuff here about in Los Angeles about not enjoying food because you're just kind of supposed to eat green grass and, you know, stuff that doesn't really taste good. And that's more spiritual than to go out and enjoy your meal. So I think that one of the great teachings of Tantra is that pleasure can be a route to God. It doesn't mean just self-indulgent, whatever we feel like, because as you progress, you realize that overindulgence isn't pleasure either.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's following your pleasure, but to truly follow your pleasure takes some self-discipline to go, you know, another beer won't cut it right now. Another helping of this cake
Yeah,
might give me pleasure, but I think my ultimate
yep,
pleasure is in not having it, so I feel great later.
exactly,
But
exactly.
really trusting that pleasure comes from God also. And as we said earlier, I just grew up in a culture where if it was pleasure, it wasn't God. And Tantra has taught me that the opposite is true.
Now, back to the warning thing. You haven't seen any like psychological stuff? Because I know you deal with psychology too, where like people show up and then they're like plagued with this connection that they can't get rid of, or these thoughts that won't leave them about the person that they were involved with. And I feel like you could do that with like some type of spiritual soul ties that happens when you do anything spiritual with someone. There's this connectedness there. And I've seen people in spiritual circles leave their spouses that they've been with for 20 years because there's another woman that shows them attention, and they can't quit thinking about him because that's the spiritual leader and this guy is spiritual. It happens a lot. And
Mhm.
have you seen anything like that happen with Tantra, or just being connected, or like that person left with something that they didn't come with, that was
Hmm.
maybe
Yeah,
only in their mind or something? I don't know how you
yeah.
want to put
Well,
it, but
in all groups, Tantra or not, that I've been involved with or that I've led, we always have a disclaimer of, don't make any decisions about your life for at least 7 days after you
that's
leave,
good.
you know, or maybe even a month, uh, because, people will come out of a Tony
Yeah.
Robbins seminar and want to just, quit their job and move to Tahiti and stuff. It's like, okay, it's great that you're enthusiastic, but
Yeah.
let's get back to our lives and see how this integrates. So there's always a process of reintegration with from psychedelic drugs, from meditation retreats, from tantra seminars. There's always a period of how does this fit back now into my life?
Yeah.
So we really always want to remind people that all these experiences are very powerful and that an integration period is important. That's why we now have psychedelic integration,
Mm-hmm.
we have tantra integration, we could say. We have from any higher consciousness, take some time to see how that fits in.
And then maybe from the hero dose of going deep and having this crazy revelation about life, about the universe, about death, and all of that, on something really far out there, bringing it back home to something more practical, whether even if it was something like in your daily routine, whether it was microdosing psilocybin or something like that, versus having this crazy, revelation and wanting to keep having that big thing over and over. And that's kind of like what it was for me, going into those states. And I had crazy revelations about my life, and I'm doing this now because of those encounters. And I had other friends though that came out of it, and they're like, I'm ready to do this again next weekend. I'm like, oh no, it's going to be 7 months for I unpack all this. And I know I have to, take this stuff in my, my daily walk. And I will say that it ended up bad for that person who tried to go next weekend and do the same thing. But, everybody's different. But for me, it's about, like you said, having those beautiful encounters, but then bringing it back to what I call to practicality, where it just kind of integrates into our lives and helps us. Like if our spirituality can't help somebody like in our day-to-day, and everybody around us is suffering, but we're spiritual and on cloud nine, like that's not what it's about. It's about bringing it back down to earth to benefit everybody around us, not just being selfish for ourselves, right?
Absolutely. And you're right. There can be this phenomenon of kind of chasing the high, just
Yeah.
wanting to be high all the time.
Yeah.
And that's called addiction.
Yeah.
And as I said before, I think anyone who's truly on the spiritual path will start noticing that that's not bringing me true pleasure. Chasing the highs is always followed by a terrible low.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for me personally, I want to just not have the lows anymore. I didn't mind having the highs, but the fact that the lows came afterwards is why I wanted to not chase highs anymore. So for example, most people have experienced how fun it is to drink a bunch of alcohol with your friends. And then the next morning, the hangover is why most people start drinking less.
Yeah.
Not because it's not fun to drink a lot.
Yeah. You have to pay for those experiences. Yeah.
It's the hangover that most people decide, I don't want to drink that much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the same thing is true with getting really enthusiastic about doing psychedelics or going to Tantra seminars or anything. It's like, I don't want that crash that comes afterwards. I want to be able to, the purpose we do these things is to change our lives, but not to have such a radical change that it throws us off balance and we get the low.
Yeah.
There's that famous phrase, I'm sure you've had it on the show before, but what do you do after enlightenment? What do you do before enlightenment?
Chop wood.
Chop wood and carry water. What do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood and carry water. So it's like life goes on. We have these experiences to change our lives. And then the real work begins. What do I do with this? How do I serve people? How do I share this?
Yep.
How do I help enlighten everyone else? Because we're all in this together. We're all one being. So how do I help my brothers and sisters? What can I do to help?
Have you seen, and this gets into the psychological part as well, have you seen the people who, they have those encounters and they come back and they think that they are an avatar, or they think that they are the Messiah figure? I mean, a lot of these cults and sects and stuff like that are kind of born out of a lot of that stuff. And these people, there's a bunch of them now, and I refuse to have these people on my show. A lot of people want me to, hey, interview this guy. I'm like, no, it's dangerous. No, stay away. I've been a part of weird cults that we are the only way and I am the savior and only what I say kind of stuff. And I'm really, that stuff's nasty, really. But have you seen that at all with the, Eastern spirituality and things like that?
I have. And it's something we talk a lot about in transpersonal psychology. And, it's a little misunderstanding because you can do a psychedelic drug and you can get that I am Jesus.
Yeah. I
am God. And then but the real realization is that we all are. We all have that in us. It's like, I think that anything that makes you feel that you're more special than anyone else is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that can be kind of a handy rule of thumb, is if somebody thinks that they're better than everyone else, it's really a position of narcissism.
Yep.
People can put themselves out at teachers and be humble and say, hey, I know some certain things about life that you don't, and I'm happy to share them.
Yep.
But I'm not going to tell you I know what's right for you.
I have to warn people to stay away from those guys. I've dealt with them. There's a bunch of them out there, and I had a conversation with a guy last night. He was in my inbox, and he was wanting to know like deep knowledge and expand his knowledge so that he can so-called be closer to God. And I had to let him know, look, you're not going to be any closer to God than you are right now. There is no this knowledge ain't going to make you closer or like special secret knowledge. It can you can have a better understanding of God and the universe and things like that, and use that in your spiritual life. Now that happens, but as far as like I'm closer than you because I did this or because I know this, I don't believe that. I don't teach that. And there's been people who I've had to deal with who have come out of those cults, and I am the teacher and I have the knowledge, and anyone who says anything different, expose them. And it's really weird, especially with Christianity. I've dealt with that a lot.
Especially. I think another rule of thumb is that if everyone still has stuff to work on. No one's achieved some sort of perfection. And I think that I think we look to our teachers to be able to be humble enough to say, hey, here's where I'm still working on myself. I yelled at somebody in traffic the other day. I'm not really proud of that, but that's where I'm still working on myself. And I think that if anyone puts themselves out as they're perfect, watch out for that.
Yeah. Manly P. Hall said,
still human.
He said that, if the status of your dog's life, if dad is so spiritual and a Mason or whatever, and he's such a good guy, but he still kicks the dog on the way out the door, then he's got some improvement that needs to be done. And so kind of, basing your spirituality off the well-being of your dog,
Exactly. Yeah. I think I wrote something about that recently. I mean, if someone goes home and yells at their wife, then they're not.
Oh, my goodness.
They're not who we aspire to be.
I've seen that so much, again, with Christianity. And I'll give this quick example, but there was a guy who was at a big church, and he was worshiping God at this church. They had the music, the praise music. He's got his hands in the air. Hallelujah. He's jumping. He's shouting. He's happy. God has done a work in his life, and he's so excited about it. He's jumping, and a little old lady behind him said, "Sir, can you keep it down? You're a little disturbing." and he turned around and he gave her a tongue lashing that you would like,
Whoa.
you MFer, I'll beat your A in this little old lady. I was like, oh wow, so you're in this super exuberant moment with God, in the presence of God, then you turn around in an instant. Okay, something's up. Like something is up. That's like,
he didn't know that little old lady was God's voice speaking to him.
yeah, exactly, right. And that, you know, with this particular person, that became a pattern. Like that would happen a lot, I found out. But yeah, that's you know, and it, you know, church, people, you know, I guess when people are into spirituality or into religion, they're trying to fix the stuff a lot of times, right? They're trying to not, what can I do to not blow up on my wife? Or when I watch the television and Donald Trump comes on there and my skin boils, like, what can I do? Like whatever it is that kind of,
we're all working on that,
irks you. So we go to church or we do spiritual practice and stuff to try to help us with that. So a lot of people do go to church Sunday morning, and 12:45 they get in their car and they're already screaming and fighting with the family and things, you know. But I think a lot of people are trying to do better, and they're trying to do good. So we kind of embrace spirituality and religion at the same time to try to help us out with that.
Definitely.
Let me ask you this. So when it comes to Osho and things like that, what actually led you to his work and to actually, you stayed for a couple years at, I don't know if you'd call it his commune. Would you call it a commune or
the one in India? I was there, lived for a year at the ashram.
And was that the main one at first?
That was the first one. That's when that one's been there since, I don't know, the 70s, I think. And then they started the second commune in Oregon. I visited the one in Oregon, but I never lived there.
Yeah.
So I've been around that for quite a while. I don't know. I just think I was always kind of born interested in spirituality. I was that kid in Sunday school who was actually asking questions.
Yeah.
I was just interested, and I was always reading books, and I just grew up with this interest in, and I think also I was kind of isolated and a bookworm, and I, when I was little, I didn't have very good social skills. So I just kind of thought about stuff a lot, and grew up just asking questions and reading and trying to find out what we're doing here. And then I just was always kind of interested in subcultures and followed my interests into spirituality. I think a lot of us, I think also having, you know, I had a difficult childhood, and I think for a lot of people, a lot of your listeners, and I think a lot of people, because we have psychological issues to deal with, it leads us towards spirituality.
I've been noticing that a lot.
You know, I was just depressed a lot as a child, and trying to deal with that depression led me to spiritual solutions. So I often tell my patients or other people, it's like psychological issues, if you have them, might actually end up to be a blessing. It might be one of the roads that spirituality takes.
I think so.
To lead you to question life and actually get to levels of higher consciousness that aren't available to people who've just always been happily in the mainstream.
Yep. Yeah, that was one thing I've always seen in the church and stuff, was that like people like myself, I used to speak in churches and tell my story and stuff, and I came out of like really dark witchcraft and spirits, and it was crazy dealing with possession and stuff like that. But I would go to churches and tell my story, and then there would be other people who would come in who used to run drugs or were in gangs or whatever type of crazy deep lifestyle that they came out of. And you're like at the edge of your seat listening to these stories and how they were into the stuff and now they're following God or whatever. And so I was one of those sharing my story, but it was always full of people who would be kind of feel let down because they didn't have that type of story. Like they were just from suburbia, you know, just regular people, never got into running drugs across the border or with summoning spells and demons. They didn't have these cool stories, and they kind of felt like they were left out when it comes to those stories of having that, you know, spiritual path or whatever.
Very glamorous, anti-glamorous, right? Or something, right?
And you try to encourage them, it's like, no, it's good. Like you're it's good that you haven't experienced that. And like,
you don't need it. You don't need it.
But they're not going to be able to stand on a stage and do that. And they kind of think that that's what it's about. You know, like this is what you're supposed to be doing as a believer or whatever the case is. And it's just not the case at all.
Your spiritual path can start just right now, today, where you are. If you just tune into being present, because we spend most of our lives not present, we're thinking about something else. So almost all of us, our minds are off in some other place than where we are right now in this moment.
Yep.
If we could start training ourselves, which is called meditation, just be here in the present moment with what my life is.
Yeah.
Then that is your spiritual journey.
Yep.
And then when we were talking about Tantra earlier, if I could bring that level of awareness into lovemaking, that's a vehicle for higher consciousness. Who knew? Who knew sex could be a vehicle for higher consciousness? But it definitely is.
Yep. So you talked about, being a part of the religious church and Christianity and stuff like that. I want to ask you about cults and stuff. You've dealt with Osho, and I guess you have a pretty good outlook on that sect and things like that. Have you ever got into any other cults or religious sects that you're glad you got away from, or you barely made it out, or you knew that it was a controlling group of people? Did you ever get into those situations as well?
I don't really have any sort of glamorous stories like that, but I have been involved. I think this word cult, if you look it up, the dictionary definition, it just means a small group of people who think alike.
Yeah.
So I think I have definitely been involved with groups of people who are teaching things that other people may have referred to as a cult.
Yeah.
But I was inside it and felt like I had total freedom to leave, have a different opinion, whatever. But other people would look at it from the outside and go, that's a cult. It's
Definitely.
like my experience on the inside of being with Osho, being with these other so-called cults, was that I'm sure there are very controlling cults. You read about them, Jonestown, this type of thing.
Yeah.
But the cults that I have been involved in, I had total freedom to think what I wanted, leave if I wanted. I wasn't giving anybody money unless I felt like making a donation. There was no pressure.
You had to pay dues.
I think we need to be careful with this word cult, that it's got, everyone's using it like that's a terrible thing. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's just a small group of people who think alike. The Catholic Church is a cult. I mean, if you think about it, it's not a small group of people.
Definitely. But there's a lot. I mean, like you said, you mentioned Jonestown, you mentioned like Heaven's Gate, and I was involved with the Hebrew Israelites for some time. And while you're in it, you feel like this is the truth, and this is the God led you here for a reason. But then a lot of times when you can't see it until you've been there a while, or you come out of it, like, wow, that was a crazy experience. I'm glad I made it out of that belief system. It changed the way I view the world. It changed the way I view my family, my people, who, all this kind of stuff. I believe people were going to hell and going to burn for eternity, and God hates a certain type of people. These different understandings that change the way you see the world. And some of those, I don't think, I don't think that's healthy at all. Even with Catholicism or Christianity, that to teach you that the people you bump shoulders with in the streets are going to hell, and if you don't tell them that, then you've missed an opportunity. That's really, really strange to kind of live your life that way,
Yeah, I think again, if it's breeding more fear and more separation, it's not healthy. If it's breeding more love and acceptance, I think that that's a good thing for people. I think it's pretty clear to look and see if this is making me hate and fear other people more.
Yeah,
it's probably a dangerous cult.
Yeah.
Turning me against my own family is probably a dangerous cult. There's no need for that. No need for that at all.
We talked about psychedelics. We talked about Tantra, sexual energy. What about awareness breathing, which is a fun one? Achieving heightened states of consciousness through holotropic breathing, changing your breathing patterns, making sure that you're breathing, all of these type of things. What have you experienced with that type of awareness breathing?
Yes, I have. I have a couple of free awareness guided meditations on YouTube. I started discovering that, you probably had people talk about this, but in the West, we're taught to breathe very shallowly and very rapidly. And most of our breath is just in this part of our body. And that kind of breathing actually fosters anxiety.
Yeah.
And this is a way that we're controlled, because if we're very anxious all the time, then we can be sold goods and services. Now, in all types of breath work, we start breathing more deeply. And this calms us. And this, to me, is why the Buddha is always shown with a big belly, because he's showing us that to breathe into our bellies makes a calm state.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never heard anyone say that, and it could be wrong, but that's what I imagine.
Yeah.
So we practice breathing more deeply. We start becoming free beings, and this is just another way that anyone in this moment can further their spiritual path is by taking a deeper breath.
Yeah.
Just taking a deeper breath will bring you more into the body, less into the hypnotized mainstream culture. And holotropic breath work is something I'd recommend if anyone wants to check it out. It can be a little frightening because it can actually, just through the power of your own breath, you can have psychedelic experiences in the same way that you would have on a psychedelic drug.
Yeah.
Right there in your own body and your own consciousness, just by breathing deeply. It's amazing. It's not something you do on your own. This is something you do with other people.
Yep.
You just get into 3 hours of just breathing so deeply that we get in touch with higher consciousness. So there's all these paths for higher consciousness, sex, breathing, that are available to anyone if we just tap in.
And then you combined it all, and you're an ascended master. Everything's good. Combine everything together. Mushrooms,
I got a lot of work
sex,
to do.
breathing. Good stuff.
I'm definitely on a spiritual path. I've definitely learned a few things, and I have a long ways to go.
Oh man, well I appreciate what you're bringing to the table. You've been at this for a while. You were on Extra some years ago too, right?
Oh, you looked into my archives there, yeah. Extra.
Good stuff. You actually have the videos and stuff of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. See, people can find that on my YouTube channel. I've been having a lot of fun making a lot of videos, so please visit my YouTube channel. Can I go ahead and spell that out?
Sure thing. Yeah, we'll go ahead and plug everything.
CATHERINEAUMAN. My website is .com. You can search for that on YouTube. I got 60 videos now, and shoot me an email or check out my books. You can do my meditation videos. However I can help you, just let me know. I like to share what I learned.
All right, Catherine. Well, I really enjoyed this podcast, and we'll have to do it again. Thank you for coming on, hanging out with me. I appreciate that.
I love it, and thank you so much for the work you're doing. I'm just so excited about it.
Awesome. No problem. Thank you, my friend. We'll have to connect again soon.
All right. I look forward to it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Catherine Auman, ladies and gentlemen. That was a good show. I was very nervous about this show, but you know what? That's a good thing. It's really a really good thing, actually. You run into a problem when you don't get nervous anymore. When you're just doing something, you got it down, you know what you're supposed to do. That's one thing, but it takes away that magic from something if you don't get those butterflies in your stomach before you go out on stage. I remember when I did gospel rap in the Christian community, and there came a point where I just wasn't nervous. I just knew how to do my song and dance and went out there and did it and killed it, did my thing or whatever. But it takes, those butterflies are there for a reason, man, and being excited about something. And so there's been times in the past where I just kind of go through the motions. That can go through anything. Like I'm making music. I can go through the motions writing a song, go through the motions doing a podcast. But my wife said this to me yesterday. She's saying like the ones that I question, or the ones that I don't know about, those usually end up being the best podcasts. As she said, the community's gonna love it, and I think you guys did. I'm reading the chat here, and I enjoyed it. So that's what it's about for me. I want to have a conversation that I'm engaged in, and I'm still trying to learn. Right? I have a lot to teach. There's a lot that I'm teaching, but I have to learn too. And I remember some time ago, and it was probably my friend Leo. I'm not really sure, but we were talking about how I don't really watch a lot of documentaries or read a lot of books anymore like I used to. I'm now trying to take all of the stuff that I've learned throughout the years that I've done this, years of studying, and trying to articulate it and put it into music and put it into videos, into podcasts and things like that, and to share what I've already learned that works, right? So when I have these guests on that are diving into a topic that it makes me remember those early days where I don't have it all figured out, right? And Tantra was definitely one of them. So I really enjoyed that talk. It was really good. CatherineAuman.com. Make sure you guys check that out. Support her work. Chris Garner's in the chat. He says she just gained herself one more subscriber. So, yeah, y'all make sure y'all support these people. It's awesome because I don't even have to tell y'all. Y'all do. I see y'all on their channels and comment on their stuff. That's what it's about. But, man, sex is, you know, and I kind of had I had second thoughts coming into this podcast because sex is powerful, man. Like, sex is sacred, you know, everything. But she's saying everything is sacred, right? So we move from all life is sacred, all thought is sacred, and why shouldn't sex be sacred? So, I didn't want to promote promiscuity. I didn't want to promote the fact of just, hey, we just meet up and have sex with random partners because we're spiritual. Trust me, there's a lot of that going on in the spiritual community. A lot of people who are open about their sexuality, and you can't tell me what I can and can't do, and they're just running wild with that stuff, right? And I've been with my wife since I was 14. I'm 34, and so I believe that sex is sacred. I believe in that union is sacred, and I think that the Bible shows that it's sacred. I think that a lot of other texts and traditions show that it's sacred as well. Upon further study in the scriptures about that, there's a lot of stuff about like covenant, coming into sexual covenant with someone, that in the West we've believed that having a marriage license is how you get married to someone. But the scriptures got some really deep knowledge on this, that actually sex is marriage. And when you come together with someone sexually, you're coming together in a sacred spiritual union. And before God, you're married, especially when it's dealing with the blood covenants, right? When you come together sexually with someone, and everything is sealed in blood covenants and blood oaths in the Bible, and just not just the Bible, throughout the world, man. They all deal with blood. The Bible says that the life force is in the blood. And when you think about that, there's a couple different scriptures, man. I'll just kind of give a couple examples. In the Old Testament, I think it was Jacob who wanted to marry Rachel. So he went to work for Laban, which was Rachel's father. He said, look, work for me for 7 years, do your best, and I will give you my daughter's hand in marriage. And I guess she was like the most beautiful of all her siblings or whatever. So anyway, he was, I guess, engaged to marry her. He worked for Laban 7 years. They were going to do the big ceremony, right, where you bring the families together, trade off, you know, here's my daughter, you know, I want this from you. Your families come together, right? It was more than just you get my daughter. Like, they're trading oxen and dividing stuff up and bringing resources together. They're having this big celebration. Laban tricks them, though. So they go through the ceremony, and then they go into the marriage bed, right, to go and consummate the marriage, to have sex. And when Jacob goes in there, Laban tricked him, and he put his other daughter, Leah, in there. So Jacob goes in, and they turn out all the lights, and he can't see anything. And he told Leah what to do. Jacob goes in there, has sex with Leah, comes out, and Leah is now his wife because he came together with her that way. Jacob's like, oh, you tricked me. You know, blah, 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 blah. Why did you do this? He's like, oh, yeah, you can't. I don't know, whatever. He tries to explain himself or whatever. He says, I'll tell you what, give me so many more years, work with me so more years, and I'll give you my other daughter as well. I'll give you Rachel. So in the story, that's what he does. He works even longer and eventually has Rachel as well. And so what that shows you is that sex is marriage. In the New Testament, Jesus is talking about spirituality and all of how we come together and stuff. And he says, did you not know that he who joins himself to a harlot has become one flesh? He's saying that when you come together with a prostitute, that's your wife. The two have become one flesh. The two have become one. That's where we get the term my other half, my soulmate, as people are saying here in the chat. My soulmate, my other half. Sex is sacred. Everything is sacred. Why wouldn't sex be? There are some studies that come out, and there's some debate on it, and there's some truth to it. But there are some studies that came out in some articles that said, did you know that women retain the DNA of every sexual partner that they've ever had? And immediately there was some backlash from different other websites and organizations and stuff. And it's on Snopes and stuff, proving it to be false. But there's certain things about that, about it's not just sexually, dealing with the semen and the DNA and stuff like that. So they were trying their best to debunk it, man. But there was some aspects of it that was proven to be true. You remember those partners. It's what we would call spiritual soul ties. When you come together and you join in that covenant with someone, and it makes sense that the Bible's calling it the two become one flesh. You remember that person, that one night stand. You can't quit thinking about them. There's a spiritual energy and a spiritual connectedness that comes with sex. Be careful. And there's people who are trying to pray that stuff away. They're in a committed relationship, but they're still thinking about the one that got away. Man, whatever happened to her? Where's she at now? I still love her. They're having these weird thoughts, right? Everybody's thinking about this stuff. To pray it away. People are trying to pray it away, and they're fasting in a way, and it won't go away. And trust me, in the church realm, we've dealt with that a lot. A lot of people trying to sever ties with their exes or whatever, but they still feel like that person's a part of them. Sex is sacred, man. Sex is sacred. So be careful. And I didn't want to promote promiscuity, man. I don't want to. We talk about these spiritual soul ties, and you can't quit thinking about that stuff. You can't quit. It just keeps coming up over and over. So do the study, do the knowledge, do the research. Sex is marriage, and it's beautiful. So I wanted to make sure that I covered that too, from like a biblical perspective. And there's so much other, spirituals. It's cool when the spiritual community or the New Age community or the secular community start embracing some of these ideas, or they explain it for you in other terms. They'll use scientific terms. I can't break down those scientific terms. I can talk about the spiritual side of it. They break it down in a very scientific way. And then you have the spiritual way. Then you have the religious way. And it all starts saying something similar. So, yeah. Check that out. It's special. I think that's pretty much it. How long have I gone on here? An hour and a half, man. An hour and a half. I don't know. Let's see. What else am I going to say? Patreon. If you're not supporting me on Patreon, shame on you. Nah, thank you guys for supporting me on Patreon. It really means the world. Everybody who's doing it. I'm really excited about this new album, man. I'm almost done. I'm in the process of waiting for some features to come back, and I have probably 2 tracks to finish. Probably 2 tracks, and I'm going to try to finish them by the end of December, so that the new year will come out with a new album. And then right after, there's already a couple songs that's going to be on the next EP right after. It's going to be the ESP EP. So there's going to be 2 EPs coming back really, really close to each other. So make sure y'all check that out. And a lot of that stuff's already on Patreon. So patreon.com/TruthSeekah. If you would like to support my work, I would really appreciate it. And I am listener supported and couldn't not do this without your help. Bring you these awesome conversations. I mean, I'm honored. Thank you. I want to read some questions here in the chat. Chris Garner says, could marriage in the sex aspect just be a literal meaning, as in marriage defined as a combination of 2 or more elements? I think so. It gets deep, man. In the Bible, it talks about to know somebody. It talks about sex, but it says he knew her. He knew her. You come into this union with someone where you know them. They're not just there. You know that person in a spiritual sense. To know everything about them, even the the intimate details about that person. You know that person. And then the cool thing is that a lot of these terms are still used when it's talking about God. Knowing God. Does he know you? Do you know God in an intimate way? In the same way, like you would approach that relationship with your spouse, the wedding chamber, coming together intimately, talking to them, building with them. Like that's the same aspect that you bring into your relationship with God, to know God on these deep levels, and he knows you. When it comes to the word, the bride of Christ is a term that's used. The bride of Christ. You're looked at like like a woman, like God's wife, and he is a jealous God. I remember that whole thing with Oprah years ago, and it was a big clip. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I'm not going to play it, but just look it up if you haven't seen it. But they're talking about God on the Oprah show years ago. And we're talking about God, and someone said God is a jealous God, right? And that's what the scripture says. God is a jealous God. And she says she does not want to follow a God who is jealous. Why is God jealous of me? It's not he's jealous of you. He's jealous over you. And we should, and we are made in the image and likeness of that God. We have that jealousy within us. Not we're jealous of, but we're jealous over. And it's used in a biblical sense where, like, you belong to God. Like, that's your husband. That's your spouse. You belong, but yet you're, and there's terminology like this, whoring after other gods, after other things. You're married to God, but you're cheating on him with idolatry. You're cheating on him with pornography addiction. You're cheating on him with these things that he doesn't, that's hurting you, right? It'd be like if you had a spouse, but they're addicted to drugs, right? You're like, man, we're trying to get you help, but you run off and you're on these binges and you're just addicted. It's this jealous love, this compassion for you, this righteous anger, and there's nothing, man, I'm telling you, there's nothing more hurtful than seeing someone who is in love, head over heels for someone, and the other person doesn't feel that way. I hate divorce, man. Hate it with a passion. When someone's in love with someone and the other person's running around, and you found out that your other half, your lover, is seeing someone else on the side, or that love isn't reciprocated, what that does to an individual, man. I've seen lives destroyed, man, big time. I've seen ministers, for the most part, people who come out of drug culture, people who come out of reckless lifestyles, and they get restored, and they get in church, and they clean their life up, and they got the kids, and they got the fam, and everything's going good. All of a sudden, the woman runs off or does something, and then just everything spirals out. The person's in jail or dead now, or addicted to substance, man. It's sad. To return that love, man, to return that adoration. When you come together with a person, it's beautiful, man. There's nothing more sacred than that, really, when you find that person. But then when you do it with God, that's beautiful. When you come together with the Father, it's like, look, I love you. I want to spend time with you. I'm trying to, bless you. And you're kind of busy. You got a lot of stuff going on. You're somebody now. You got a podcast, you do music, you're kind of a big deal. But you break away from that and you go back to the place where it all started. You go back to that intimacy. That's what it's about for everybody. Your busy life, your busy day, breaking away from that stuff to draw away unto God, man, with that sexual union. Intimacy. Some people get mad. But then some people take it to a whole nother level, right? this intimacy with God of being something of mockery or something where I've seen people do it. You know, some of these cults that we're kind of mentioning get into like this weird stuff when it comes to that. But God wants to know you, man. He wants that relationship to be deeper, to know that you're not alone, to know that you got somebody that has your back. Like, that's a big thing. That was big for me, especially coming from a broken home, knowing that I had somebody that loved me no matter what. This is both. This is the spouse side and this is the spiritual side. When I met my wife, when she was my girlfriend at the time, man, I knew that I had somebody who loved me for me. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to be somebody else, but that just loved me regardless, man. It changed my life as a teenager. Gave me liberties that I didn't have. Gave me a confidence in myself, just to know that I'm loved. And then on top of that, that's one thing that was powerful in the physical realm. But when it comes to God, understanding the love of God, that no matter what you did, no matter what you done, God still loves you, is still trying to pursue you. There's nowhere you can go. There's nowhere you can run away to get away from the love of God, to hide from the presence of God. The Bible is full of stories from Genesis to Revelation where people have been in this relationship and then they get into some things or open up doors and they step away, maybe even for years. Maybe that's even some of you. Maybe that's your story. You've been away for years. And I know people who feel like God's given up on them, or they feel like they hurt God. There's no way God would take me back. I wouldn't take myself back. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways, man. The love of God that moves past anything and everything that we could do, to think that we've passed the point of no return, that we can never come back. There's nothing we can do, nowhere we can go that we can hide or run away from the love of God. Every single one of us, man. To pursue that and then get into that intimacy. Get alone with God. We talk about a lot of crazy stuff on here. We're very open with spirituality. We talk about all of the aliens and psychedelics and all types of angels and all just crazy stuff that would seem way left field, man. And I'm open to all of it. But it first comes out of a relationship with God. Elementals, spirits, all types of stuff. A lot of it's in the Bible, and that's what gets me, right? But that relationship with God, with the Father, whatever your Father brings you to, out of that intimacy, whatever He reveals, there's secrets in the universe about life, about the earth, about everything. There's secrets that God has that He's never told anyone about, that He's willing to just do pillow talk with you. Hey, you want to? I'm gonna tell you how I do it. This is how I do it. Look at the stars. Look at this. You ever thought about this? And it's like beyond your wildest dreams. Eye has not seen and ear has not heard the things that God has in store for those who love Him. It gets crazy, guys, but it's beautiful. It is a journey, man. It is a journey. So I don't see how anyone would want to do it without the assistance of the Creator. Like, would do it on your own terms or just the way that you want to. This song and dance, man, this journey is so beautiful. It is awesome. When you find out how consciousness works, when you find out that the steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord and nothing happens without reason. You don't meet people for no reason. Just, well, it was just, yeah, kind of cool. Everything happens. Your life starts to line up. Your journey, it becomes real. Like, look, somebody's watching me. Somebody knows these thoughts I'm thinking. Somebody wants to hang out. That notion right there blew my mind. As a teenager, I was depressed a lot. Thought about suicide a lot. I always felt like I was by myself. But then when I got born again, when I came into the knowledge of Christ and I came into this relationship with God, that was one thing that changed. Because I still was like actually by myself a lot, but I never felt alone again. From that point, never felt alone. Always had somebody there. Always had somebody there. That relationship, that confidence that, look, man, loneliness, nobody understands. Throw that out the window. And God is there, man. And it's just beautiful, man. This whole song and dance with the universe, with the Creator. That your life has meaning. Your life has purpose. People have given up on you. Your family's given up on you. Your teachers gave up on you. Your friends, everyone's given up on you. So you're like, whatever, man. I gave up on myself a long time ago. Why not? But you understand that God has not given up on you. That the promises of God are yes and amen. And in Jeremiah 29:11, He has plans to bless you with a future. Doesn't have any ideas or plans to harm you or to punish you and you're in trouble. Nah, man. Let's come back into the loving arms of the Creator. That's what it's about, man. That's a grace that allows you to explore. That's a grace that allows you to seek out the deep things of God. I wouldn't have got into any of this on the other side without God. But God, man, you know, if you're mad, blame God. That's what it's about. Work with God instead of against Him. That's just been my song and dance here lately. Work with the presence of God than working against, which we've been doing the majority of our lives, right? So I hope that spoke to somebody's heart. Just to be open and honest about this relationship with the Creator. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. At the end of the day, you don't want to open up any doors. You don't want to do anything. Like the scripture says, Jesus said, I don't do nothing that I don't see my Father doing. May that be your prayer. May you love the things that God loves and hate the things that God hates. Hold yourself to a higher standard, man. Sexually. May you work upon your second virginity. Whatever it is, wherever God finds you, man. He finds us all in different places, man. I'm going to reach out to this lady, man. She was an ex-prostitute. I actually had one on a long time ago. And the weird thing about that one, Angie Duncan, an ex-prostitute, right? Sex worker. And I think she was in some porn films and things like that. She was on the show. And she told her story. Like, God finds people in different places, man. Paul Washer, the great preacher. Listen to his story, man. He shares it with tears in his eyes. God found him laying in his own piss and vomit on a drunken stupor. Woke up, throw up on his shirt and piss all over himself. God found him, called him. He repented of his sins and been following the Lord ever since. God finds us in different places. God found me in a place where I couldn't hold a thought together. Hearing voices and seeing spirits, and it was not good. God finds us all in different places. Never forget where you came from, man. It's so easy to do. Man, it's like 20 years ago. 20 years ago. It's easy to forget. Everything's good now. Stuff is way behind me. It's easy. I needed him then. You wake up every day understanding that I need God as much today as I needed him laying in a pool of piss. Throw up all over me. I need him as much as I needed him in 1998. I need him more. Without him, where would you be? That's the grace, the same grace that was applied back then I look at these people, man, you know, I bring this stuff up. These people who have, you know, lost their families, lost their health. And I'm just always just thankful, man, you know. And to know that you could lose it all too. I could lose it all. But it is the grace of God that keeps us. It is the grace of God that restores us, no matter where we are. To maintain that, a lot of people can get to a lot of places, man, with your good looks, with your talents, with your abilities. Will you let your talents and your good looks and things bring you to places that your character can't keep you? This isn't a game. It's not a game. It's not a game. It's not a game, man. This is the real deal. One wrong move. One careless flirtation. One email response. One night stand can mess up something that took years for you to build. Your career, your marriage, whatever it is, man, whatever's in your lap. Those who have been forgiven of much, much will be required. Those who have been forgiven much, they love much. That's what it's about. Love you guys, man. Chris Garner says that your character can't keep you. That's profound truth. We see it all the time, man. That's why, you know, we're talking about the alcohol thing. You have to pay for that. It's like those quick fixes, man. You got to pay for it. The process is there for a reason. When you understand the process, we get weary and well-doing, and we're like, man, I've been doing this for years, and why is everybody else married? Why does everybody else have a ministry? Or why does everybody else have an awesome career and doing what they love? Look, trust the process. At the end of the day, God is the one who orchestrates it all. Trust the process. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Trust the process. How much longer? Learn everything that you need to learn at that job. Learn everything that you need to learn in the wilderness. Feel like God's a million miles away. Learn everything you need. What are you trying to tell me? Learn it all and then learn some more. Eventually, if you don't break, if you don't crack, if you stand the test of time, your breakthrough is going to come, man. Trust and believe. Okay, I've learned everything. I'm past ready. What else do I need to do? Keep it up, man. It's coming. You're almost there. You don't even know it. You don't even know it. It's good stuff. It's wisdom. With that again, man, thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I really did. So with that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. Follow us in all the social media links and all that kind of stuff. Join us on Discord if you want to build with our community. I'd love to talk to you. All the links are in the description. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom, guys. Later.
Your way so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.